Hello, guys. My name is James, and today I'm going to be interviewing my friend Randy, and we're going to be speaking about determinism and free will and where the world stands with that. So, Randy, if you could just tell us a little bit about your position.
Um, my name's Randy. Um, I grew up raised Roman Catholic. I was born to a Pentecostal family, but I was adopted by, shouldn't even say by a family of Roman Catholics. Only my mom was a practicing Catholic, but she had to say in what I would be raised as. And I was brought up in a Catholic, the Catholic faith, and really that shaped a lot of my thoughts and beliefs about really important questions in life, and ultimately is going to tie into where I stand on the question of free will and things like that.
Okay. And my name is James. Much like Randy, I did learn to grow up with some Catholic beliefs. I did go to church and I did get confirmation, but as my high school and college career went on, I did learn to drift away. And with the way that the world is now, I'm slowly adopting more of the deterministic belief that maybe we aren't free and maybe all of our decisions are just determined from factors that we had little to no control over. So Randy, I'm curious, what makes you come to accept, or, just come to accept the idea that, or accept more of what God has taught with free will?
Well, as you alluded to, there is this idea that we don't have free choice in the decisions we make, and I think this just makes a complete mockery of how we experience life. One example that comes to mind is, the justice system, right? So, we have this idea that moral outrage is justified when individuals commit certain moral atrocities, such as, shooting up a school of children or something like that. All of, the world gets angry when we hear these things, but, you have to ask yourself, does that make sense to really show outrage and anger toward a person when they literally could not have done anything else? It's kind of terrifying, even if you accept it intellectually. Just the idea of living that way, where you can't be angry at someone over the decisions they quote unquote make, just seems absurd to me. So that's just one example of how I just feel like determinism kind of robs us of our humanity, so to speak.
Well, Randy, even with the idea that, determinism would hold the idea that there is little to no moral accountability based on what an individual does, I still think that they should be held accountable for the action that they committed. In terms of that school shooting, I don't think the person should be punished. I think the person should be instead rehabilitated. Maybe those factors can maybe change them. What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, I would say that you could do both. Like, you could, punish the person, because I think I think you enter another problem if you believe in only rehabilitation for someone that does something that, like, gruesome. But yeah, rehabilitation could be a part of it as well. The whole point is, yeah, you could do all that, but you just can't look at this person with any sort of emotional outrage of any kind, because they couldn't have done otherwise. But again, to your point, like you said, yeah, you can still see them as a threat, and therefore place them in whatever institution or program that you see fit. But the point still stands about the whole moral accountability thing.
Hmm. Well, in terms of the moral accountability, would you agree that what would be considered a free choice or free will?
Yeah, and this is like where it gets really interesting, because in my view, I don't really see free will and determinism as complete polar opposites. They kind of work with a sort of polarity, so to speak, because you know um, I think there are certain degrees, like freedom essentially is a product of free will. There is free will, but there's also destiny. And, like you can look at, I'll give an example. All right, so look at, I'll use LeBron James's son as an example. All right, Bronny Jr. All right, so I do believe that he freely chose to be a basketball player. He did. However, like I would say his freedom was geared toward playing basketball because you have to ask yourself, his dad is one of the greatest basketball players of all time. What are the chances that he didn't wind up playing basketball? All right, so people can be put in certain conditions and upbringings and things that influence that freedom. But as a Catholic, I would say I believe in libertarian free will, which isn't necessarily a Catholic, it's not the Catholic stance on free will, but essentially it's just the idea that nothing external to you determines your decisions. All right, so if I were a determinist, I would believe that everything was determined by how the neurons in my brain are firing off in any given moment, my upbringing, who I was surrounded by as a kid, the laws of nature and such things. But like ultimately, I would say though those things don't determine with 100% certainty what I'm going to do. They influence, but don't. It's not like a 1+1 = 2 thing that you believe as a strict determinist.
Hmm. Because I would believe that like most actions have influenced or at least made a chunk of us in some form or way, whether we had control over it or not. Like, would you say that you had control over the music that you listened to as a kid or the TV show that you were able to watch?
Yeah, so again, like I was put in a certain environment. Obviously I would not have the freedom to watch the TV shows that I watched or listen to the music that I listened to if I grew up in North Korea. Uh, just, just not a thing, right? Understandably so. However, at the end of the day, I do believe that as a child, there was some point where I had no taste in music, no taste in TV shows of any kind, and I used my will, my judgment to assess the different things and made a free will choice of what I would, pursue and listen to more than, other things and things of that sort, if you get what I mean.
So, Mr. Randy, choices are determined from like what you're given and brain function. Where does free will come from as a kid?
As a Catholic, I do believe that there is a soul, right, that each human being has that is the source of things like intellect that separates us from the rest of the animals, our ability to reason, to understand the universe, and things like that. I would say as you, develop, you are able to, through your mind, better access, these capabilities that you've been granted as a child of God, or I should say a human being with God's image.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So in other words, like you have this spiritual essence to you. You're not just flesh and bone, and that is what essentially instantiates your will and your freedom to do what your flesh and blood, your deterministic flesh and blood would otherwise determine you to do.
So it's interesting that you mentioned the spiritual essence.
Sure.
And as far as the spiritual essence goes, is there any limitations or is there any way to cultivate it or develop it?
Yeah. So as human beings, we are limited, of course. While I do have free will, I can't will myself to fly. That's just not within the capabilities that God has given me. But yeah, there is this soul that we've been given. It like the human body has to be taken care of and nourished. So as a Catholic, we nourish our soul through reading reading the scriptures, going to mass, experiencing the sacraments, and all that jazz.
Okay. And then, assuming that reading is based on the physical stuff, would you say the physical stuff influences the soul? Or?
Yes. So as a dualist, the idea that there is a body and a soul, they interact with one another. They, feed off of each other. Like when human beings sin, we believe that something spiritual is going on there, that your soul is damaged, or you're being separated from God, but you do it through physical means. Well, pretty much every sin you commit involves your flesh,
Okay.
so to speak.
Dualism is an interesting concept that you mentioned that. I know that's like, I know finding that basis still going on today, so I hope that maybe this interview managed to, maybe add a little bit more further grounds, if not for my students or, my classmates, at least for other people that are looking to watch this.
Yeah, me too. It was really great. I enjoy conversations like these all around. So I appreciate you picking me to do your interview with.
No problem. No problem, Randy. Honestly, I'm glad to have you on. So, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no problem.
All right.